You're not my responsibility. Those 5 words shattered something in me that no amount of time could ever repair. My son, the boy I'd nursed through pneumonia at age 7, the teenager I'd worked double shifts to send to college, the man I'd helped with his down payment, stood in my living room and said those words to my face. All I'd asked was if he could visit once a month. Once. A month. But here's what he didn't know. I'd already made a decision that would change everything. My name is Patricia Whitmore, and this is the story of how my son's cruelty led to the biggest shock of his entitled life. Before I tell you what happened when he tried to contest my estate, I want to know, where are you watching this from? Drop your state or country in the comments. I love knowing I'm not alone in this. It started on a Tuesday morning in March, here in my home in Spokane, Washington. I'm 72 years old, and I'd been living alone for 6 years since my husband Bernard passed. The house felt bigger every year, the silence louder, the walls more like a museum of memories than a home. I wasn't asking for much, just a monthly visit from my only child, Marcus. Marcus is 45 now. He lives 30 minutes away in a house I helped him buy. He's got a good job at a tech company, a wife named Stephanie who barely acknowledges my existence, and 2 teenagers who I've seen maybe 5 times in the past 3 years. I used to think maybe they were just busy. That's what I told myself every holiday I spent alone, every birthday that passed with just a phone call, every Sunday when I'd cook a full dinner and eat it by myself, pretending I wasn't hoping to hear a knock at the door. That Tuesday, I'd decided enough was enough. I called Marcus and asked him to come over. We needed to talk. He showed up 2 hours late, checking his phone every 30 seconds like he was expecting a call from the president. "What's so urgent, Mom?" he asked, not even taking off his jacket. I'd rehearsed this conversation 100 times. I'd tried to keep the hurt out of my voice, tried to sound reasonable instead of desperate. "Marcus, honey, I was thinking, maybe you could visit once a month. Have dinner with me, or even just coffee. I miss you." He sighed. Actually sighed like I'd asked him to donate a kidney. "Mom, I'm really busy. Work is crazy. The kids have activities. Stephanie's got her book club and yoga and—" "Once a month," I repeated. 2 hours. That's all I'm asking." That's when he said it. When he looked me straight in the eyes and spoke those words that would seal his fate. "You're not my responsibility." I felt something crack inside my chest. Not my heart. Hearts break from love. This was something else, something harder and colder. This was the moment I realized my son had become someone I didn't recognize, someone who saw his own mother as a burden instead of a person. "I see," I said quietly. "Thank you for making that clear." Marcus left 5 minutes later, and I sat in my kitchen for an hour staring at the wall. The afternoon light filtered through the lace curtains Bernard had hung 20 years ago, casting shadows that looked like prison bars across my floor. I wasn't crying. I was past crying. I was calculating. You don't get to be 72 years old without learning a few things about people. You learn who shows up and who makes excuses. You learn the difference between being loved and being tolerated. And you learn that sometimes the hardest truth is accepting that you raised someone who turned out nothing like you hoped. I thought about all those years, the sacrifices Bernard and I made. We weren't rich people. He worked at the lumber mill, I was a school secretary, but we saved. We did without vacations, drove old cars, wore the same winter coats for a decade. All so Marcus could have opportunities we never had, and he'd taken them. Oh, he'd taken everything we offered and more. When he was 23 and got his first apartment, who co-signed the lease when he had no credit? When he wanted to marry Stephanie and needed money for the wedding, who dipped into their retirement savings? When he lost his job during the 2008 recession and couldn't make his mortgage payments for 4 months, who made those payments? Bernard and I did. We did all of it without complaint, without asking for payback, without keeping score. Because that's what you do for your child. You give and give and give, and you tell yourself that someday, when you're old and need them, they'll remember. They'll be there. I'd been so stupid. That evening, I made myself dinner, chicken pot pie, Bernard's favorite, and I ate it slowly, thinking. I had assets. Not a fortune, but not nothing either. The house was paid off, worth about $400,000 in today's market. I had Bernard's life insurance money, mostly untouched, sitting in investments. I had my own modest savings and a pension. Altogether, I was looking at an estate worth roughly $650,000. And I'd always assumed it would go to Marcus. I'd even told him as much, years ago, thinking it would give him security, make him feel valued. Now I realized what a mistake that had been. I'd given him the comfort of knowing he'd inherit everything, which meant he had no incentive to actually care about me while I was alive. Why visit a lonely old woman when you're guaranteed her money anyway? But here's the thing about being the one who's still alive. You get to make the decisions, and I was about to make one that would change everything. The next morning, I called my neighbor, Donald Chen. Donald was 68, a retired accountant who'd moved in next door 4 years ago after his wife passed. We'd become friends, real friends. He checked on me during snowstorms, fixed my porch railing when it came loose, brought me vegetables from his garden. He did these things not because he wanted something, but because he was a decent human being, a concept my son had apparently never learned. "Donald," I said when he answered, "I need to talk to you about something important." Donald came over that afternoon with a container of his homemade egg rolls. That was Donald. He never showed up empty-handed. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd served Marcus thousands of meals, and I told him everything about the visit, about what Marcus had said, about the decision I was making. "I want you to be the executor of my estate," I said. Donald set down his tea carefully. "Patricia, that's a big responsibility. Are you sure? What about Marcus?" "Marcus made it clear I'm not his responsibility," I said. "So he won't be mine either. I'm not cutting him out entirely. I'm not cruel like he is, but I'm making changes, and I need someone I trust to make sure my wishes are followed, someone who won't be manipulated or bullied." I told Donald my plan. I was going to revise my will. Marcus would get $25,000, enough to show I hadn't forgotten him, but a far cry from the inheritance he was expecting. The house would go to the Spokane Humane Society, an organization I'd volunteered with for 15 years. The rest of my assets would be divided between several charities and a scholarship fund for underprivileged kids at my old school. And Donald would be the executor, making sure every penny went where I wanted it. "He's going to contest this," Donald said quietly. "You know that, right?" "Let him try," I said. "I'm of sound mind. I'll have everything documented properly. He can waste his money on lawyers all he wants." Donald agreed to help me, and the next week I met with an attorney named Beverly Hartstein. She was sharp as a tack, maybe 60 years old with steel gray hair and eyes that didn't miss anything. "I want to make sure this is airtight," I told her, explaining the situation. "My son will fight this." Beverly nodded. "Then we'll make it impossible for him to win. First, we'll have you evaluated by a physician to document your mental competency. Then we'll create a detailed memo explaining your reasoning for the changes. We'll have witnesses. We'll make it crystal clear that this is your decision, made freely and with full understanding." Over the next month, I did everything Beverly suggested. I went to my doctor, Dr. Raymond Pierce, who'd been treating me for 20 years. He did a full cognitive evaluation and documented that I was completely mentally sound. I wrote a detailed explanation of why I was making these changes, describing Marcus's neglect in specific terms, dates he'd promised to visit and didn't, holidays he'd skipped, the conversation where he'd called me not his responsibility. I didn't tell Marcus any of this. He called twice during those weeks, brief obligatory calls where he talked about himself for 5 minutes and then said he had to go. He never asked how I was doing, never asked if I needed anything. He was proving my point with every interaction. The new will was finalized on a Thursday in May. I signed it in Beverly's office with Donald and Beverly's paralegal as witnesses. When I walked out of that office, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Powerful. I wasn't a burden or an obligation. I was a woman making her own choices about her own life. Summer passed. I didn't hear much from Marcus. Maybe one call every 3 weeks. Always rushed. Always about him. In July, Stephanie accidentally called me while trying to reach someone else. When I answered, she sounded annoyed, like I'd inconvenienced her by picking up my own phone. "Oh, Patricia, I thought I was calling the salon. I have to go." She hung up before I could respond. That's what I'd become to them, less important than a hair appointment. But my life wasn't empty, even if they'd abandoned me. I had Donald, who came over for coffee every Tuesday and Friday. I had my volunteer work at the Humane Society, where I spent every Wednesday morning socializing the cats and dogs. I had my book club with 6 other women who'd become real friends. I had a life, and I was living it without waiting for my son to remember I existed. In September, I had a health scare. Nothing major, chest pains that turned out to be severe heartburn. But it required an ER visit at 2 in the morning. I called Donald, not Marcus. Donald drove me to the hospital, waited with me for 4 hours, and took me home. He made sure I had groceries and checked on me every day for a week. I didn't call Marcus until 3 days later, just to see what would happen. "You went to the ER and didn't call me?" he said, and for a moment I thought I heard actual concern. Then he continued, "Jesus, Mom, what if something had happened? I would have had to deal with all kinds of legal stuff without any warning." Legal stuff, not grief, not loss, legal stuff. "Sorry to inconvenience you," I said, my voice ice cold. "I'll try to give you more notice next time I have a medical emergency." He didn't even catch the sarcasm. "I'm just saying, keep me in the loop, okay? Anyway, I've got a meeting. Feel better." That was it. No. "I'm glad you're okay." No. "Do you need anything?" Just concern about his own inconvenience. The holidays came. Thanksgiving, Marcus called to say they were going to Stephanie's parents' house in Seattle. Christmas, he sent a text saying they were doing a small, immediate family thing and would see me later. That later never came. By New Year's, I'd stopped expecting anything from him at all. I spent Thanksgiving with Donald and 2 other neighbors. We had a feast, and I laughed more that day than I had in months. Christmas, I volunteered at a community dinner and came home feeling full in a way that had nothing to do with food. My 73rd birthday came in February. Marcus sent a card, store-bought, generic, signed just Marcus and Stephanie, that arrived 4 days late. Donald threw me a surprise party with my book club friends and half the neighborhood. There was cake and terrible karaoke and genuine affection. These people, who shared no blood with me, celebrated me more than my own son ever had. That's when I knew, without any doubt, that I'd made the right decision. Marcus had walked away from me long before I'd changed my will. I was just making the legal reality match what was already true. I was not his responsibility, and he was no longer mine. I didn't think much about the will after that. It was done, and I was living my life. But then, on a rainy Monday in March, exactly 1 year after that devastating conversation with Marcus, I fell. I was coming down the stairs, carrying a basket of laundry like I'd done 10,000 times before. My foot caught on the edge of the carpet runner that was slightly loose. For one terrifying moment, I was airborne, the basket flying, my arms flailing for something to grab. Then I hit the hardwood floor at the bottom of the stairs. The pain was immediate and excruciating. My left hip, my right wrist, my ribs. I tried to move and cried out. My phone was in the kitchen. I was alone, and I couldn't get up. I don't know how long I lay there before Donald came by. He had a key for emergencies. We'd exchanged keys years ago, the kind of practical arrangement neighbors who care about each other make. He'd noticed my newspapers piling up and got worried. When he found me, I was barely conscious. He called 911, and the next thing I clearly remember is being in the hospital, doctors telling me I'd fractured my hip and broken my wrist. I'd need surgery. I'd need recovery time. I'd need help. This time, the hospital called Marcus. He showed up at the hospital 12 hours after my surgery, looking inconvenienced and stressed. "Why didn't you call me?" he demanded, not "how are you?" I was worried. "I was unconscious," I said, my voice weak from the anesthesia. "Donald found me." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Donald again, that neighbor you're always talking about." "That neighbor," I said slowly, "is the one who saved my life. Where were you?" "I was at work, Mom. I can't drop everything every time you have a crisis." Every time. Like I made a habit of fracturing my hip for attention. The orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Amanda Reeves, came in then. "Mrs. Whitmore will need significant recovery time, 6 to 8 weeks before she can live independently again. She'll need someone to help with daily activities, physical therapy appointments, medication management." Marcus's face went pale. 6 to 8 weeks? "At minimum," Dr. Reeves said. "Possibly longer given her age. Do you have family who can help?" Marcus looked at me like I'd done this on purpose to ruin his life. I have work. And the kids. Stephanie's really busy with her nonprofit board and—" "I'll help," Donald said from the doorway. None of us had heard him come in. "Patricia can stay. With me, or I can stay at her place. Whatever works better." "You?" Marcus said, and I didn't like his tone. "Why would you do that?" Donald looked at him with an expression I'd never seen before, pure disappointment. "Because someone should. And if you're watching this and you understand what that moment meant, if you've ever felt forgotten by your own family, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. This story is about to get very interesting, and you won't want to miss what happens next." Donald took me home 2 days later. Not to his house, but to mine. I wanted to be in my own space, surrounded by my own things. He'd already prepared everything. He'd installed a temporary railing on the stairs, moved a bed downstairs into the den so I wouldn't have to navigate the stairs, stocked the kitchen with easy-to-prepare meals, and even brought over a walker from his friend who'd used it after knee surgery. Marcus called that night. "I still think you should have told me you were planning this with Donald. I'm your son. I should be the one making these decisions." "You're not my responsibility, remember?" I said quietly. "So I found someone who wanted to be." He went silent. Then, "That's not what I meant, and you know it." "What did you mean, Marcus? Explain it to me. Because from where I'm lying, literally lying in a bed I can barely get out of, it seems like you meant exactly what you said." He hung up. He actually hung up on his injured elderly mother. Donald stayed with me every day for 6 weeks. He drove me to physical therapy 3 times a week. He helped me shower, humiliating but necessary, without ever making me feel like a burden. He cooked meals, did laundry, helped me with exercises. He even read to me in the evenings when the pain medication made it hard to focus on the page myself. Marcus visited twice in those 6 weeks, once for 20 minutes, once for 30. Both times he looked at his watch repeatedly. Both times he left without asking if I needed anything, but he noticed everything Donald was doing. I could see it in his eyes. Confusion, maybe a little jealousy, definitely resentment. His mother's neighbor was doing what he should have been doing, and instead of feeling grateful, he felt threatened. "You two seem pretty close," Marcus said during his second visit, his tone carefully neutral. "We're friends," I said. "Good friends, the kind who show up." He caught my meaning. His jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. By late May, I was mostly recovered. I could walk with just a cane, manage my own daily activities, drive again. Donald had saved my life in more ways than one. Without him, I would have been in a nursing home, the very place I'd spent my entire life trying to avoid. The place my son would have probably stuck me without a second thought. On the day I was officially released from physical therapy, Donald and I celebrated with dinner at my favorite restaurant downtown. Over dessert, I told him something I'd been thinking about for weeks. "Donald, you've done more for me in 2 months than my son has done in 10 years. I want you to know that I've already made arrangements. But if anything happens to me, You're the executor of my estate. I trust you completely." "I know," he said gently. "You told me last year, remember?" I smiled. "I remember. I just wanted to say thank you for everything." What I didn't tell him was that I'd updated my will again. Marcus's share had dropped to $15,000. After watching his behavior during my recovery, he'd earned less, not more. I had no regrets. Life settled into a comfortable routine. Summer came, and I was fully mobile again, back to my volunteering, my book club, my garden. Donald and I became even closer. We took walks around the neighborhood every evening, went to farmers markets on Saturdays, watched old movies on rainy Sunday afternoons. We were companions in the truest sense, two people who'd found friendship in the loneliness of widowhood. Marcus called once a month, always brief, always superficial. He never asked about my recovery, never acknowledged Donald's help, never apologized for his absence. Then, in October, something shifted. Marcus started calling more often, started asking questions about the house, about my finances, about whether I'd thought about the future. "I'm just worried about you, Mom," he said during one of these calls. "What if something happens? Are all your documents in order? Do you have a will?" Warning bells went off in my head. Why are you asking about this now? I'm your son. I should know these things. I've been thinking maybe we should sit down with a lawyer, make sure everything's set up properly. Translation. He wanted to make sure he was getting what he thought he deserved. "Everything's handled," I said. "I met with an attorney 2 years ago. Everything's documented and legal." "Oh." He sounded surprised, maybe disappointed. "Well, good. That's good. Can I ask, I assume I'm the executor? I should know where you keep the documents, what your wishes are." My stomach turned. This was it. The real reason he'd been calling more often. He was circling, waiting, planning for my death like a vulture. "Marcus," I said slowly, "when did you start caring about my legal documents?" "I've always cared." "No," I said, my voice harder than I'd meant it to be. "You haven't. You told me I wasn't your responsibility. You disappeared for months when I needed you most. Now suddenly you care about my will? That's not fair, Mom. I've been busy." "Too busy to visit your mother once a month, but not too busy to think about your inheritance." The silence on the other end was deafening. "I think we should talk about this in person," he finally said. "I'll come over this weekend." He didn't come that weekend, or the next. He was all talk, as usual. But in November, something happened that forced his hand. I had another accident. Minor this time, just a car accident in a parking lot. Someone backed into me. No injuries, just property damage. But it required insurance calls, police reports, dealing with the repair shop. I mentioned it casually to Marcus during one of his calls. His response was immediate and telling. "Jesus, Mom, you're becoming a liability. Maybe it's time to think about selling the house, moving somewhere with support." Support. He meant a nursing home. He wanted me in a nursing home so he could sell my house and pocket the money. "I'm 73, not 93, I said coldly, "and I'm staying in my house." "I'm just thinking about what's best for you." No, he wasn't. He was thinking about what was best for him. And I was about to make sure he never got the chance to make any decisions about my life at all. I died on a Tuesday in early January, peacefully, in my sleep, in my own bed in my own house, exactly the way I'd wanted to go. I had a heart attack, quick and painless according to Dr. Pierce. I was 73 years old, and I'd lived my last years on my own terms. Donald found me that morning. He'd come over for our Tuesday coffee, let himself in with his key, and called my name. When I didn't answer, he came upstairs. He told me later, yes, I know how that sounds, but stay with me, that I looked peaceful, like I was just sleeping. He called 911, then he called Marcus. Marcus showed up 3 hours later, not in grief, not in shock, but in planning mode. While my body was barely cold, while the coroner's office was still processing paperwork, Marcus was asking Donald about the will. "Where are the legal documents?" he asked. "I need to start handling the estate." Donald looked at him with barely concealed disgust. Your mother just died. And someone has to take care of things. I'm her son. I'm the executor. No, Donald said quietly. You're not. Marcus froze. What? You're not the executor. I am. I wish I could have seen Marcus's face in that moment. Donald described it to me. Oh, right, I should explain. I'm not actually dead. That was a narrative device. I'm alive and well, sitting in my kitchen, drinking coffee and telling you this story. But that Tuesday in January, that's when everything changed. What actually happened was this. Marcus tried to file documents with the county claiming he was the executor of my estate. He'd somehow gotten it into his head that he was automatically in charge just because he was my son. He filed papers, started making claims about my assets, even tried to get access to my bank accounts. That's when Beverly Hartstein, my attorney, sent him a letter. A beautiful, legally airtight letter, informing him that he was not the executor, that Donald Chen was, and that any further attempts to claim authority over my estate would be considered fraud. Marcus lost his mind. He called me, screaming about betrayal, about how I was his mother, about how I couldn't do this to him. I let him rant for 5 minutes before I spoke. Are you finished? How could you do this? His voice cracked. I'm your son. And you told me I wasn't your responsibility. Remember that. I asked you for 1 visit a month, Marcus. 1. And you said I wasn't your responsibility, so I took you at your word. That's not... I didn't mean... What did you mean? Tell me what you meant when you said those words to your mother. He had no answer. Of course he didn't. Donald is my executor, I continued, my voice steady and cold. He's the one who showed up. He's the one who cared. He's the one who earned my trust. You had your whole life to be the son I deserved. You chose not to be. What about my inheritance? You can't just... Can't what, Marcus? Can't make my own decisions about my own money? Watch me. Marcus hired a lawyer. Of course he did. An expensive one from Seattle who specialized in contesting wills. They filed a lawsuit claiming I was mentally incompetent when I made my decisions, that Donald had unduly influenced me, that I wasn't of sound mind. It was insulting, but it was also stupid. Beverly had prepared for this. We had everything documented. Dr. Pierce's cognitive evaluation, my detailed written explanation for my decisions, witness statements, bank records showing I'd managed my own finances perfectly for years. We had dates and times of Marcus's neglect, phone records showing how rarely he called, testimony from neighbors about how Donald had cared for me during my recovery. The court case was scheduled for March. In the weeks leading up to it, Marcus tried everything. He called me, alternating between angry accusations and tearful apologies. He sent Stephanie to talk to me. That was hilarious. She showed up at my door in designer clothes and fake concern, trying to convince me that Marcus really loved me and had just been stressed. Where were you during that stress? I asked her. Where were you when I fell down the stairs? When I spent 6 weeks unable to care for myself? She had no answer. She left 10 minutes later. Marcus even tried to turn my grandchildren against me. He told them I was being mean to their father, that I was giving away their inheritance to a stranger. My grandson, Tyler, called me crying, asking why I didn't love them anymore. That broke my heart. But I told him the truth. Tyler, I love you very much, but your father taught you the wrong lesson by telling you that my money is your inheritance. My money is mine. I earned it. Your grandfather and I saved it, and I get to decide what to do with it. What I won't do is reward your father for abandoning me. But he didn't abandon you. Honey, when was the last time you visited me? When was the last time you called me just to talk? Silence. That's not your fault, I said gently. You're 15, but your father is 45 and he made choices. Those choices have consequences. The court date arrived. The courtroom was small, institutional, nothing like the dramatic TV courtrooms. Marcus sat with his lawyer looking confident. He thought he'd win because he was my son, because blood was supposed to mean everything. Beverly presented our case methodically and thoroughly. Medical records, financial documents, my written statement read aloud by the judge, testimony from Dr. Pierce, from Donald, from my neighbors, a timeline of Marcus's neglect, phone records, everything. Marcus's lawyer tried to argue undue influence. Beverly destroyed him with facts. She showed that I'd made these decisions before my accident, before Donald's extensive caregiving. She showed that I'd been managing my own affairs perfectly. She showed that Marcus had, by his own admission during a recorded phone call, referred to me as not his responsibility. The judge listened to everything. Then he looked at Marcus with an expression that made me grateful for the American legal system. "Mr. Whitmore," he said, "your mother was and is of completely sound mind. She has every right to distribute her estate as she sees fit. Your contest is denied." Marcus's face went white, then red. Then he stood up and walked out without looking at me. That was 8 months ago. The house is still mine. I'm living in it right now, healthy and happy. The will is unchanged and legally upheld. Marcus gets his $15,000 when I die, and not a penny more. Everything else goes exactly where I want it. Marcus hasn't called since the court date. Not once. He proved everything I'd believed about him. He didn't love me. He loved what he thought he'd inherit. When he couldn't get the money, he had no use for his mother at all. Do you know what the funny thing is? I'm not sad about it anymore. I was, for years. I mourned the son I thought I had, the relationship I'd hoped we could have. But his behavior during the lawsuit killed whatever grief I had left. He showed me exactly who he was, and I believe him now. Stephanie sent one text after the court case. "I hope you're happy." I didn't respond. I am happy, but not for the reasons she thinks. My grandchildren, that's harder. Tyler called me once 3 months ago. We talked for 2 hours. I told him I loved him, that my door was always open to him, that this wasn't about him. I don't know if he believed me. I hope someday he'll understand. But here's what I want you to know. Everyone watching this. You don't owe anyone your suffering, not even your children, especially not your children who refuse to show up for you while demanding you leave them everything. I'm 74 now. Donald and I are still neighbors, still friends. We're taking a trip to Portland next month to visit his daughter. I'm still volunteering at the Humane Society. I'm still having coffee with my book club. I'm still living in my house, managing my own life, making my own decisions, and I'm at peace. When Marcus said I wasn't his responsibility, he freed me. He freed me from the obligation of pretending we had a relationship we didn't have. He freed me from the guilt of making decisions that didn't center him. He freed me to live my final years surrounded by people who actually care. The money I'm leaving to charity will help animals who need homes, kids who need education, causes that matter. That money will do good in the world instead of being wasted by someone who never appreciated the sacrifices made for him. Beverly told me that cases like mine are becoming more common. Children who neglect their aging parents and then feel entitled to their estates. She said more parents are standing up, making different choices, refusing to reward abandonment. I hope my story helps someone out there make the choice that's right for them. Your money, your assets, your life, it's yours. You get to decide what happens to it. And if your children want to inherit, they should earn it by showing up while you're alive to see it. That's my story. That's how my son's 5 cruel words led to the biggest shock of his entitled life. And I'd make the same decision again in a heartbeat. Thanks for watching. And remember, family isn't just blood. Family is who shows up.